Thus having heard from Gerizim, I shall next come to Ebal, and you thither call, not there to curse you, but to let you hear how God doth curse that soul that shall appear an unbelieving man, a graceless wretch, because he doth continue in the breach of Moses' law, and also doth neglect to close with Jesus. Him will God reject and cast behind him, for of right his due is that from whence all miseries ensue. Cursed, saith he, are thy that do transgress the least of my commandments, more or less. Nothing that written is must broken be, but always must be kept unto by thee, and must fulfilled be, for here no man can look God in the face, or ever stand before the judgment seat, for if they be convict, condemned to assuredly now keep this law no mortal creature can, for they already do, as guilty, stand before the God that gave it, so that they obnoxious to the curse lie every day, which also they must feel for certainty, if unto Jesus Christ they do not fly hence, then, as they forever shall be blessed, that do by faith upon the promise rest, so peace unto the wicked there is none, 'tis wrath and death that they must feed upon. That what I say may some impression make on carnal hearts, that they in time may take that course that best will prove when time is done. These lines I add to what I have begun first. Thou must know that God, as he is love so he is justice, therefore cannot move, or in the least be brought to favor those his holiness and justice doth oppose. For though thou mayst imagine in thy heart that God is this or that, yet if thou art at all besides the truth of what he is, and so dost build thy hope for life amiss, still he the same abideth, and will be the same forever unto thee. As God is true unto his promise, so unto his threatening he is faithful. To cease to be God he must, if he should break one tittle that his blessed mouth did speak now, then, none can be saved but the men with whom the Godhead is contended when it then beholds with the severest eye of justice, holiness, and yet can spy no fault nor blemish in them. These be they that must be saved, as the Scriptures say. If this be true, as 'tis assuredly, woe be to them that wicked live and die, those that as far from holiness have been all their life long, as if no eye had seen their doings here, or as if God did not at all regard, or in the least mind what, wherein, or how they did his law transgress, either by this or other wickedness. But how deceived these poor creatures are, they then shall know when they their burthen bear. Alas, our God is a consuming fire, so is his law, by which he doth require that thou submit to him, and if thou be not in that justice found that can save thee from all in every sentence which he spake upon Mount Sinai, then as one that break it, thou the flames thereof shall quickly find as scourges thee to lash, while sins do bind thee hand and foot, forever to endure the strokes of vengeance for thy life impure. What I have said will yet evinced be, and manifest abundantly to thee, if what I have already spoken to be joined with these lines that do ensue. Justice discovers its antipathy against profaneness and malignity not only by the law it gave to men, and threatenings thereunto annexed then, but inasmuch as long before that day, he did prepare for such as go astray, that dreadful, that so much amazing place hell, with its torments for those men that grace and holiness of life slight and disdain, there to bemoan themselves with hellish pain. This place, also, the pains so dismal be, both as to name and nature, that in me it is not to express the damning whites, the hellish torture, and the fearful plights thereof, for as intolerable they must needs be found, by those that disobey the Lord, so can no word or thought express unto the full the height of that distress. Such miserable caitiffs, that shall their rebukes of vengeance, for transgressions bear. Indeed the Holy Scriptures do make use of many metaphors, that do conduce much to the symbolizing of the place, unto our apprehension. But the case the sad, the woeful case of those that lie as racked there in endless misery, by all similitudes no mortals may set forth in its own nature, for I say similitudes are but a shade, and show of those, or that they signify to you the fire that doth within thine oven burn, the prison where poor people sit and mourn, chains, racks, and darkness, and such others, be as painting on the wall, to let thee see by word and figures the extremity of such as shall within these burnings lie. But certainly, if wickedness and sin had only foolish toys and trifles been, and if God had not greatly hated it, yea, could he any ways thereof admit, and let it pass, he would not thus have done. He doth not use to punish any one with any place or punishment that is above or sharper than the sin of his hath merited, and just as seeth do, read sin, then, by the death that doth ensue most men do judge of sin, not by the fruits it bears and bringeth forth, but as it suits their carnal and deluded hearts, that be with sensual pleasures eaten up. But he that now so judgeth, shortly shall perceive that God will judge thereof himself, and leave such men no longer to their carnal lusts, to judge of wickedness, and of the just and righteous punishment that doth of right belong thereto, and will, too, in despite of all their carnal reason, justify himself, in their eternal misery. Then hell will be no fancy, Neither will men's sins be pleasant to them, but so ill and bitter, yea, so bitter, that none can fully express the same, or ever stand under the burden it will on them lay, when they from life and bliss are sent away. When I have thought how often God doth speak of their destruction, who his law do break, and when the nature of the punishment I find so dreadful, and that God's intent, yea, resolution is, it to inflict on every sinner that shall stand convict, I have amazed been, yet to behold, to see poor sinners yet with sin so bold, that like the horse that to the battle runs, without all fear, and that no danger shuns, till down he falls. O resolute attempt so sad, amazing, damnable events, the end of such proceedings needs must be, from which, O Lord, save and deliver me. But if thou think that God thy noble race will more respect, than into such a place to put thee, hold, though thou his offspring be, and so art lovely, yet sin hath made thee another kind of creature than when thou didst from his fingers drop, and therefore now thy first creation stands thee in no stead. Thou hast transgressed, and in very deed set God against thee, who is infinite, and that for certain never will forget thy sins, nor favor thee if thou shalt be a graceless man. This is thy misery. When angels sinned, though of higher race than thou, and also put in higher place, yet them he spared not, but cast them down from heaven to hell, where also they lie bound in everlasting chains, and no release shall ever have, but wrath, that shall increase upon them, to their everlasting woe. As for the state they were exalted to, that will by no means mitigate their fear, but aggravate their hellish torment here, for he that highest stands, if he shall fall, his danger needs must be the greatest of all. Now if God noble angels did not spare because they did transgress, will he forbear poor dust and ashes? Will he suffer them to break his law, and sin, and not condemn them for so doing? Let not man deceive himself or others. They that do bereave themselves by sin of happiness, shall be cut off by justice, and have misery. Witness his great severity upon the world that first was planted, wherein none but only ate the deluge did escape, all others of that vengeance did partake. The reason was, that world ungodly stood before him, therefore he did send the flood, which swept them all away. A just reward for their most wicked ways against the Lord, who could no longer bear them in their ways, therefore into their bosom vengeance pays. We read of Sodom, and Gomorrah too, what judgments they for sin did undergo, how God from heaven did fire upon them rain, because they would not wicked ways refrain, condemning of them with an overthrow, and turned them to ashes. Who can know the miseries that these poor people felt while they did underneath those burnings melt? Now these, and many more that I could name, that have been made partakers of the flame and sword of justice, God did and cut off, and make examples unto all that scoff at holiness, or do the gospel slight. And long it will not be before the night and judgment, painted out by what he did to Sodom and Gomorrah, fulfilled upon such sinners be, that they may know that God doth hate the sin, and persons too of such as still rebellious shall abide, although they now at judgment may deride.